Welcome to this explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to have such an expert audience with us today as we tackle what is, without a doubt, one of the greatest cryptographic anomalies in human history. For over a century, the Voynich Manuscript, officially known as Voynich Library MS408, has just stood there like an impenetrable wall. Codebreakers from Bletchley Park all the way to modern AI laboratories have hit the exact same dead end. But today we're going to dismantle those old assumptions completely. We're diving into a groundbreaking new mathematical and paleographic framework called the Luth's matrix paradigm. And as you'll see, this model proves this manuscript isn't a language at all, but something far, far more ingenious.
So the crucial point is really this. We've literally been looking at the manuscript through the wrong lens for 100 years. As principal investigator René Luth points out, every single linguistic transcription model out there, especially the widely used extensible Voynich alphabet, or EVA, has flatly failed. Why? Because they treat the text as linear phonetic strings. We need to completely leave the idea of spoken words behind us. What we're actually looking at is an Iconic-Combinatorial matrix, a highly standardized structural framework of drawn information capsules.
All right, here's our scientific roadmap for today. First, we'll look at the entropy anomaly. Second, the Lego principle. Third, the drawn blossom text chains. Fourth, the three-stage anchor mechanics, and we'll wrap it all up with the computer vision protocol.
Okay, starting with section 1, the entropy anomaly, which gives us the mathematical proof of why the old methods failed.
Let's dive straight into the hard numbers. I really want to ask you to leave your linear reading habits at the door for a minute. To understand why the Luth paradigm is absolutely crucial, we have to look at the undeniable mathematical failure of the traditional alphabet theory. Now, for the experts tuning in, let's break down the statistical entropy distribution. In information theory, a natural written language, like say Latin or Middle High German, has a dynamic flow. It exhibits a stable first-order character entropy, somewhere between 4.0 and 4.8 bits per character, right? Because of dynamic phoneme interaction. MS408 actually mimics this at roughly 4.3 bits, but here's the anomaly. It features this normal character entropy alongside an artificially, abnormally low word entropy. When you see massive repetitive blocks like chan and dine, it mathematically precludes it from being fluid phonetics. These are standardized, modular blocks repeating in a rigid structural rhythm.
And here is the absolute nail in the coffin for the alphabet theory, the Markov chain anomaly. Think about it. In a true phonetic alphabet, letters transition freely depending on the sound of the word. But in MS408, characters are literally prisoners of their spatial architecture. Take the symbol transcribed as EVA Q. It is positionally locked at the absolute beginning of word blocks with over 99% exclusivity. Gallows signs completely dominate paragraph tops. Characters N and M are restricted almost entirely to the ends of words. A phonetic letter can appear anywhere. If a symbol can only exist at the absolute start or end of a block, well, it's not a sound at all. It's a functional structural template.
Moving right along to section 2, the Lego principle and the vector decomposition of the matrix.
This brings us to the new theoretical model. If MS408 isn't an alphabet, what on earth is it? Well, it's a highly engineered two-dimensional combinatorial matrix. Just look at the actual architecture. Historically, researchers kept looking for around 30 to 40 characters, but when you look at the complete catalog, it reveals 185 physical original signs. However, these are definitely not 185 isolated letters. They act as a closed, combinatorial Lego-like toolkit.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is René Luth's vector equation. It brilliantly illustrates that any complex glyph in the manuscript is actually a composite. Through a mathematically automated decomposition, we see that a glyph equals a carrier stem multiplied by a modifier filling. You start with about 12 to 15 base geometric stems, like a shallow arc, a closed cup, or the vertical axes of a gallows sign. These dictate the semantic root class. Then you've got about 6 modifier fillings, an internal dot, top loops, or maybe a horizontal wave chain. You literally plug the modifier into the carrier stem to alter its syntactic or functional value. It's a pure mathematical matrix.
But we have to anchor this historically. This isn't some alien code dropped from the sky. Carbon dating places the vellum firmly in the early 15th century. This Lego matrix is actually an extreme evolution of ancient and medieval shorthand. Specifically, we're talking about the Tironian Notes, heavily documented in Adriano Capelli's archive. In these systems, a single grapheme stem, spatially modified, could compress an entire Latin suffix or complex scientific term. MS408 simply takes this cross-European scribal shorthand, completely ditches the Latin alphabet, and turns the abbreviation marks themselves into the primary, language-independent visual script.
Okay, let's dive into this next part. Section 3, Drawn Blossom Text Chains and the Paleography of MS408.
The physical paleographic evidence regarding how the ink was actually applied to the vellum, it changes the whole game. A microscopic analysis of the ductus, the actual stroke execution, shows absolutely zero signs of a fast-flowing cursive hand. There are no fluid links, no ink accumulations at tight curves, and, get this, absolutely no manual scribal corrections. The glyphs were not written cursively, they were drawn. They were carefully painted with the exact same slow, rhythmic hand movements used to create the botanical illustrations beneath them. This establishes the whole system as visual graphic mimicry.
And we see this clearly in the botanical sections, with what Luth calls blossom text chains. The text strings actually mimic the geometry of the plants themselves. Flat arc glyphs mirror leaves, tall gallows mirror stems. So, for the experts looking for a precise decoding instruction, here it is. Stop reading this as a narrative describing a plant. Treat it as a step-by-step pictorial command log for a physical laboratory procedure. A sequence of glyphs literally dictates something like, take the closed cup module, meaning the seed cluster, follow it with the open arc, meaning execute a separation or cut. Then attach the gallows, meaning insert it into the carrier device. It's a visual flowchart. But to decode these pictorial commands accurately, we need to apply a strict mechanics system.
Let's move to Section 4 and see how this builds. Three-stage anchor mechanics, or the system transformation.
Now you might be wondering, if a system only has about 15 core root shapes, how do you prevent semantic collisions? I mean, how do you avoid total chaos when the same Lego block is used in botany, astronomy, and pharmacology? The answer is system transformation. To accurately decode these blossom text chains, you have to follow a precise, top-down mechanism. Stage 1, isolate the macro anchor. Stage 2, identify marginal anchors. And Stage 3, decode the micro-initial glyph. Let's break that down.
First up, the macro anchor. This is the dominant main illustration on the page. It's not just a pretty picture, it's the master switch. If you're in the botany section, an archic glyph means an organic plant part. But the second you turn to a page with an astrological diagram, that macro anchor shifts your active mental dictionary. Now, that exact same archic glyph means a temporal phase, like a phase of the moon. Then we have marginal anchors, like the paragraph stars with trailing lines you see on folio 58R. They act as structural breaks, halting the text flow and forcing the reading mode into a rigid, tabular, spreadsheet-like list. Finally, the micro anchor. You know those massive, highly decorated gallows signs at the start of paragraphs? They aren't words. They are index markers that dictate the specific grammatical equation for the short module chain that immediately follows them.
Which brings us to our final section, Section 5, the Computer Vision Protocol. This is the roadmap for the scientific community.
All right, so we have the architectural blueprint. Now it's time to shift our focus to operational practice and how the international scientific community must proceed. I want to deliver a firm, energetic directive to the cryptographers out there. We absolutely must abandon traditional linguistic description models. Stop treating MS408 as a phonetic string of letters. Running linear string matching or cryptoanalyzers that look for standard word frequencies, it's a waste of computational power. It is an evolutionary dead end.
Instead, here is the precise automated computer vision protocol we need. We must train convolutional neural networks, or CNNs, on the Luth metrics registry. The goal is to geometrically segment these glyphs into their true vector components. We need the system to mathematically isolate the carrier frame from the modifier filling. Once decomposed, the algorithm has to execute a highly detailed correlation measurement. We literally mathematically map the statistical correlation coefficients of specific stem and filling combinations directly against the active macro anchor illustrations on that page. By proving how a modifier's frequency shifts between, say, botanical and astronomical anchors, the CNN will output the precise functional grammar of the MS408 matrix. This finalizes the paradigm shift.
So what does this all mean? The Luth paradigm finally pulls the Voynich manuscript out of the realm of esoteric hoaxes and establishes it for what it is, a masterpiece of medieval information design. But it leaves us with a truly fascinating, provocative question. Think about it. If MS408 is actually an elite language-independent visual tracking system utilizing compressed vector logic, what other unsolvable historical texts sitting in archives right now are we simply trying to read with the wrong lens? It completely reshapes our understanding of historical cryptography. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Now go out there and look at the past with a whole new perspective.